Pat McCabe. We'll have a few minutes for a moderated Q&A today, and we'll be collecting questions from the chat or direct message to me in the chat as well. But before that, I will hand it over to Sister Eileen Mackenzie, who is president of the Franciscan Sisters of Perpetual Adoration in La Crosse, Wisconsin, to begin us in prayer. Welcome, Eileen. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eric, and blessings to everyone. I'm coming here from La Crosse, Wisconsin, which is the ancestral lands of the Ho-Chunk Nation. And I would like to just invite everyone to take a breath as we all land in the room. And this meeting has happened after Pope Francis issued an apology to the Indigenous people of Canada when they went to the Vatican. And I'd like to just ground us a little bit in what he had to say in his apology. In these days, a beautiful image kept coming up. You compared yourselves to the branches of a tree. Like those branches, you have spread in different directions. You have experienced various times and seasons, and you have been buffeted by powerful winds. Yet you have remained solidly anchored to your roots, which you kept strong. In this way, you have continued to bear fruit, for the branches of a tree grow high only if its roots are deep. I would like to speak of some of those fruits. First, your care for the land, which you see not as a resource to be exploited, but as a gift from heaven. For you, the land preserves the memory of your ancestors who rest there. It is a vital setting, making it possible to see each one's life as a part of a greater web of relationships with the Creator, with the human community, with all living species, and with the earth, our common home. Yet that tree, the beautiful image that you compared yourselves to, has experienced a tragedy that you described to me in these past days. The tragedy of being uprooted. The chain that passed on knowledge and ways of life in union with the land was broken by a colonization that lacked respect for you, tore many of you from your vital milieu, and tried to conform you to another mentality. In this way, great harm was done to your identity and your culture. Many families were separated, and great numbers of children fell victim to these attempts to impose a uniformity based on the notion that progress occurs through ideological colonization, following programs devised in offices rather than the desire to respect the life of peoples. This is something that, unfortunately, and at various levels, still happens today. Ideological colonization. How many forms of political, ideological, and economic colonization still exist in the world, driven by greed and thirst for profit, with little concern for peoples, their histories and traditions, and the common home of creation. Sadly, this colonial mentality remains widespread. Let us help each other together to overcome it. Let us help each other together to overcome it. Let us help each other together to overcome it. So be it, so be it. Amen.
Thank you so much, Sister Eileen, for those words, for that grounding. May it be so. May we overcome it. May we transform it. As I let those words settle in me or move in me, I'll just speak a few words to introduce our session today. I am so excited for this time together. Joining us today are Naima Penniman of Soulflower Farm and Wild Seed, and Pat McCabe, a Dene activist and elder. And if you don't know, both are kind of famous. So wow, very honored that they're here. Thank you. And they're both just really respected leaders in and across movements for climate justice. Naima, I'll say I've admired your work from afar, and I'm just so honored that you're here and to be connecting. And Pat, I'm so grateful for the generosity of your time that you've shared with our team and with sisters already. And we'll just say that your wisdom has already shaped this work, and you are truly a bridge and guide. So thank you both for being here. So we're going to be moving it over to speakers rather quickly, but before I do, I'll just provide a minute or two of a refresher on where we are. Thus far in the course, we've done a few things together. We've named what feels like a historic opportunity for ecological and racial justice through property planning and land transitions. We've started to dig into the roots of climate crisis and land injustice, which is to say the present day impacts and manifestations of colonialism, capitalism, systemic racism. And we have lifted up some of the spiritual resources and perspectives alive within Catholic and Christian lineage that can support us in the work ahead. And now in the course, we're going to be turning a bit more towards how we can orient and show up in the here and now in solidarity for movements and with movements for land justice. Today, I hope we can start to illuminate the web of kindred spirits and groups and networks who are already building towards land return, climate resiliency, Black and Indigenous stewardship and liberation. And we will be highlighting that work and those bold visions today. And then next week, we'll be getting more into the nuts and bolts for how we might walk this path with the stories and the tips and the technical options that are coming from radical real estate agents, attorneys, and land trust experts. So that's a little bit of a preview for what's ahead and a refresher on where we are. And then just lastly, I'll say that after the last session, or just towards the end of the last session, there was a really sweet moment where folks stayed and were just kind of releasing and relishing in the enthusiasm of the moment. There was just like a real sense of collective power in that moment. And something that was said then that feels really resonant now is that in doing this work together, in building relationships with each other, with sisters from different communities, with our movement partners, that we make each other braver and safer in taking risks for land justice. So I just wanted to elevate that moment. It feels really true now. And I hope that today's session will continue to embolden our most creative and courageous and just dreams. So with that, I will introduce our first guest teacher, Naima Penniman. Naima Penniman is a freedom forging futurist rooted in her ancestors' brilliance. She is a devotee of seeds, a soulful storyteller, a multi-dimensional artist, movement builder, medicine grower, healer, and educator. Lifelong lover and defender of the earth, Naima dedicates her creativity and community building skills to regenerate practices towards planetary interdependence. She serves as the Director of Education at Soulflower Farm, where she equips a returning generation of Black, Brown, and Indigenous farmers with the skills needed to reclaim leadership in the food system and chart dignified futures in relationship to land. She is the co-founder of Wild Seed, a BIPOC-led land-based community focused on ecological collaboration, transformative justice, and intergenerational responsibility. Published in All We Can Save, We Are Each Other's Harvest, Farming While Black, and Semillas, Naima is a visionary poet whose performances have inspired thousands of people and movements across the world through groundbreaking work of climbing poetry. Originating member of the Black Healers Collective, Harriet's Apothecary, and founder of the Haitian Resilience Project, Ayiti Resurrect, Naima is devoted to cultivating collaborations that elevate the healing of our earth, our bodies, our communities, lineages, and descendants. Naima identifies as queer, non-binary, multiracial, Black, Haitian, and a child of the earth. Welcome, Naima. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so honored to be with you all. I know we're in different places, but I really feel your presence, and I'm so grateful that we get to be in conversation today. And thank you for the sacred gift of your attention to the storytelling and idea sharing that we'll be doing. So one of my loves is poetry. I'm going to begin and end with some poetic verse just to support us in feeling connected to each other. I am because we are. And who are we to each other? Beyond the great dividing, we are interwoven and arising, recognizing our survival depends on our deciding to cast aside the lies that build a hierarchy of lives. What do you see on the horizon? Are we in hiding? Are we thriving? Have we been guided through the night, made it to the other side? Times are shifting. What are you witnessing? Kiss the ground is whispering, come, fall to your knees. I need your listening. Hush the mind so you can hear the signs as they reveal themselves. Slow down, we are running out of time. And can you feel yourself? No distractions, face our shadows so we can heal ourselves. Complete the circle. We have all we need around us, between us, and inside of us. We were born right now for a reason. We have our light and compass guiding us. And we can be whatever we give ourselves the power to be. And right now, we need dream weavers, bridge builders, truth sayers, light bearers, food growers, wound healers, trailblazers, life lovers, peace makers. Give what you most deeply desire to give. Right now, you are choosing to live or you are waiting. Why would a flower hesitate to open? Now is the only moment. Raindrop, let go, become the ocean. Possibility is as wide as the space we create to hold it. Thank you. And if I could ask our tech people to please give me the screen share capacity, I would love to share some images with you.
Should be good.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Naima.
Yes, my pleasure. Can y'all see the image okay? Okay,
It's up there.
So I'm gonna do a little bit of storytelling about Soulfire Farm, which is where I am right now on the ancestral territory of the Stockbridge Munsee Mohican Nation. And also weave in the stories of how Soulfire Farm is connected to a whole lineage of African, diasporic, indigenous, and other people of color-led land justice projects. And so we're gonna go on a little bit of a storytelling journey. And want to first just give a shout out to the whole team, because I'm one in a number of the people who are holding this sacred work. And I also want to give a shout out to the land herself, who is our #1 partner and collaborator. And back in 2006, my sister, Leah, purchased the deed for 80 acres of mountainside land along with her partner, Jonah, really determined to start a reciprocal farm to feed both the earth and the people. And back in 2006, when we arrived, the USDA deemed the land unsuitable for agriculture, right? This was a degraded, hard-pan soil. But despite that, we could really feel the pulse of aliveness below its crust. We could feel the protection of the encircling forest. And we knew that, our ancestors have always had to figure out how to grow food on marginal lands. And, we really trusted that if we could reclaim our Afro-Indigenous farming techniques, we could regenerate this land to grow an abundance of food for our communities. And so that's when the journey began of remedying the soil so it could produce life-giving food and medicine for folks in our community who need it most. And here we are, like 14 years later, and I'll share the kind of 3 pillars of our work and what we're really up to in partnership with the land. So the first big part is to feed our community and steward the land, right? And we are on 80 acres, and we're really committed to implementing our Afro-Indigenous agroforestry, silvopasture wildcrafting, polyculture, and spiritual farming practices as a way to regenerate this land. And with it, we're producing vegetables, fruits, pasture-raised livestock, eggs, honey, mushrooms, and preserves for our community. And with that bountiful harvest, we want to make sure it gets to those who need it most. So we have a doorstep delivery program that allows the food to go to people who are living under food scarce conditions through a solidarity share. And, through that process, we've sequestered 50,000 pounds of carbon in the soil. We've restored a number of native plant species and called a lot of biodiversity back to this area. And then the second part of our mission is really about teaching as we learn. Each one teach one is a real strong principle for us. And thousands of people come to the land to learn with us every year, from youth to adults to elders. And we're really determined both to equip our community with the tangible skills like cation exchange capacity and seed saving and everything you need to know how to go from seed to harvest, as well as how we heal our relationship with the land, how we heal from racial trauma in relationship to land. So we have everything from day-long programs, like I'm just coming from a day-long community day, to week-long immersions, to a whole 18-month fellowship, and other programs to support our community. And then the third pillar is rabble-rousing. It's about system change and building the movement, right? Because as y'all may well know, the food system as it stands now makes it really hard to be a farmer. It makes it really hard on the earth, the way that we're farming. And so we're really trying to change laws and policies and structures through our alliances, through our movement work and our systems change work, which I'll share a little bit more about. But that's kind of the overview, all right? And now I want to kind of weave in the history and the present until we arrive at like bolder futures. What are we imagining as we're moving into the futures that we get to help shape? And one thing that we're really reckoning with is how the food system in our country has been built on both stolen land and stolen labor, right? And we know that the doctrine of discovery continues to be the basis for US property law. It was upheld by the Supreme Court from 1823 all the way to 2005 here in our state in New York against the Oneida Nation, and used as justification for dispossessing Indigenous people from over 150 billion acres of land, right? And that has not been remedied. And then concurrent with that, we've had immense loss of land to the Black community. And despite slavery and sharecropping and convict leasing and discriminatory lending practices, Black folks managed to amass at our peak 15% of the nation's farmlands. But now in this day, that was in 1915, and now in this day, a century later, we're down to 1%. And this has been through a lot of discriminatory USDA policies. It's been through a lot of racial terror and folks fleeing the violence of the South. Through air property laws, there's been a lot of ways that Black land has been usurped. And so this map is showing a bit of the wealth denied to the Black community through this loss of rural land. And property is the #1 way that wealth is generated in this country still. So land loss alone has cost $120 billion of intergenerational wealth from the Black community. And that has so much to do with this moment that we're in, that we find ourselves in. And it shows up in a number of ways. One is food insecurity, right? We live under a system where some people live with an abundance of choices of what they can eat, and others live in food scarcity, right? And we call this a system of food apartheid. The government deems certain neighborhoods food deserts, which we reject that term because deserts are a naturally occurring part of our ecosystems. There's nothing natural about the huge disparity in terms of our access to the food we need to sustain ourselves and our families. And unfortunately, hunger and diet-related illness in Black, Indigenous, and other people of color communities is the #1 killer. It's the #1 cause of death, as well as diet-related illness. White neighborhoods have an average of 4 times more supermarkets than Black neighborhoods. So access to food, and then also who grows our food, right? So our food system is built on this legacy of exploited labor that hasn't fundamentally changed, right? And the majority of the people who grow our food, over 85%, have been recruited from other countries and still have no equal protection under the laws. They get specialized and restrictive visas under our guest worker programs as migrant workers, and are subject to wage theft and exploitation. And there's been really few pathways to leadership inside of the system. And you can see on this graph how, while over 85% of farm workers today are Latina, less than 3% of the management is Latina, right? And the pandemic, we know, has exacerbated already problematic dynamics where, farm workers are essential workers, but often less vulnerable and treated as disposable. And then our distribution of land, in this moment right now, in 2022, the distribution of rural land is more racially skewed than it ever has been before in our nation's history, with over 98% of the land that can grow food controlled by the descendants of European colonists. Right? So we're still struggling with that disenfranchisement of Black land ownership. And you can see how it's been going down. And then also the way that we're growing food is trashing the planet, right? Industrial agriculture, which is rooted in this ethos of exploitation of land and labor, is also, one of the leading drivers of greenhouse gas emissions. It's one of the leading drivers of habitat conversion, of water withdrawals, of water pollution, and many other environmental impacts, right? It's like how we're treating the people who are closest to the earth and how we're treating the earth herself. And so this is what we're trying to shift. And I want to invite us to bring some breath into our bodies, because that's a hard reality to grapple with, hard history, and just to feel our aliveness and our power in this moment. And now I want to move into what's being done and what can we do to make things right. Okay, so I'm going to share some solidarity strategies, both from the past and how they weave into the present, giving some examples from Soul Fire as well as folks who were in the movement with. So first, I want to give a shout out to our ancestral grandmothers who had the courage and the foresight in the face of the transatlantic Middle Passage, the journey into slavery, to braid into their hair the seeds that their communities had been saving for generations, right? The okra, the cotton, the sesame, the black-eyed pea, they braided those seeds into each other's hair before boarding the ships, because that was social security for an uncertain future. Right? Having foresight that we, their descendants, would exist to inherit and carry on that seed. And not only did they physically braid those seeds, but I believe they also braided the knowledge of how do we grow food in right relationship with the earth, right? And there are so many practices that we cherish today that we can credit to our African ancestors. Everything from soil testing by feel and taste, vermicomposting, which is composting with worms, African dark earth, which is this powerful way of making this rich compost, jardin la cour and terrace gardens, the invention of the hoe, and on and on. You know, we can give thanks to the Ovambo people for the raised beds. You can see here sweet potato slips being put into mounded soil, which helps with protection from floods, which keeps the soil warm, encourages a healthy soil food web, and so many regenerative practices that, you know, we can trace back into our lineages and reclaim because we know how to feed ourselves without trashing the planet, right? And that has inspired us so much at Soulfire. So we also use raised beds, we use heavy mulches to encourage like a healthy fungal community. We mulch with muck from the swamps and pull leaves from the forest. We rotate our vegetables every season, and we rotate animals with our vegetables. We use worm composting and so much more. We use terrace gardens, all of these practices that were passed down to us from those who braided them into each other's hair. I want to give a shout out to one of our beloved ancestors, Dr. George Washington Carver, who was one of the founding professors of Tuskegee University, the first Black agricultural university in our country. And he's one of the fathers of regenerative agriculture. He was able to convince a whole generation of farmers in the South to take their crops out of cash crops like cotton and tobacco and to plant in leguminous cover crops. You see the peanut in his hand? The peanut is a legume. It belongs to a family of plants that has this incredible ability to transform atmospheric nitrogen into nitrogen in the soil. That's the mineral food that helps plants grow. And through that was able to heal acres and acres and acres of degraded lands throughout the South. And here you can see, you know, through planting in leguminous cover crops, how we transformed our soil from this hard clay degraded soil into this rich humus, you know, by employing these practices. And now we can grow so much food for our communities. And Dr. Carver and other professors at Tuskegee University developed what I would call the first extension agency in our nation, right? At first, all they could afford was a mule and a cart, and they would go around to the most busted, dilapidated farms in the county, and they would perform an extreme farm makeover, right? They would employ these practices to help heal the soil. They would nurse the livestock back to health, and that would become the demonstration site for the whole county, and they would move on to the next. And this is that important practice of each one, teach one. Eventually, they upgraded to a vehicle like this and continued on that mission. And so similarly, we have been inspired by this, right? This is the principle of each one, teach one, right? Not only can we grow food, but how do we teach each other how to grow food? These are some pictures from our farming immersion program. And this is our week-long program where Black, Indigenous, and other people of color aspiring farmers come to the land and get to learn with us, right? And, you know, we spend our days waking early with the dew and the sun and carrying feed to the animated chickens and crouching close to the earth to transplant squash seedlings and sifting the rich soil for purple and gold potatoes, right? And we're both skilling up on soil science and propagation and the fundamentals of raising vegetables and healing plants and cooking together. And then we're also doing that work of healing our relationship to the land. And I wonder if y'all can guess what's happening in this picture. This is a photograph of the Black Panther Party in their free breakfast program. And the Black Panthers were responsible for feeding over 20,000 children free breakfast every day in Oakland. And this was the basis for the programs we have in our public schools, right? The Panthers also drove elders to their doctor's appointments. They drove people to visit loved ones who were incarcerated. They provided free groceries to folks. And this is, a real strong example of survival programs. Like, how do we take care of each other? So shout out to the beautiful example of the Black Panther Party. And that has also inspired us at Soulfire Farm. Like, yes, how do we get food to our people? And as I mentioned before, like, where does all this food we grow come from? This is so important to us that folks who are living under food apartheid conditions are able to eat this life-giving food. Folks who are surviving mass incarceration, folks who are refugees, new Americans and immigrants, folks who have chronic illness, our elders. And so every week, starting in June through November, our harvest season, we box up everything that's in season and we put it in this creepy white van. That's my nephew, Emmett. And we drive it all around Albany, Troy, and Schenectady, our neighboring cities, and we drop it off on the doorsteps of people who are part of our Solidarity Share program. This is a no-cost program, so money isn't a barrier, and we make sure to bring it right to people so that transportation isn't a barrier. And it's so important that we all have this access, right? Y'all know how much we're impacted when we're not able to get the nourishment that we need for ourselves. So that's solidarity sharing. And then y'all might have heard the phrase, if you give someone a fish, they're gonna eat for the day, but if you teach them how to fish, they're gonna eat forever, right? And so that's why we don't wanna stop at just dropping the food off. So we started a program called Soulfire in the City where we're teaching folks how to grow their own sustenance. We started this program back in 2016, but since the pandemic, interest has grown so much. People are starting to really get it. Like, we need to take control over our access to food that we need to eat every day. And so since 2020, we've established more than 50 home gardens, bringing volunteers together to support folks in our community who wouldn't otherwise be able to grow their own food, and providing mentorship. And we see this work as a continuation of the legacy of a long lineage of BIPOC growers who developed these alternative food systems to sustain their communities. Here's a few more pictures of the builds. We build almost like a sandbox and fill it up with compost and soil. And then we work with each gardener to figure out what do they want to harvest and develop crop plans. And we transplant and direct seed and continue to provide, guidance throughout the growing season. And we just started three new gardens yesterday. So this is feeling really alive. It's a very exciting program. And I'll read this beautiful quote from this family here who participated last year. And they said, "Growing our own food during this time connects us to the earth in a way that truly feeds our souls. In this time when we feel such a lack of control and we are overwhelmed by an avalanche of daily pressures and uncertainty, we are blessed to have the opportunity to slow our breath, kneel down, and watch for signs of life in the dirt. Each leaf brings hope and promise. Each blossom whispers the earth is our first mother. The garden is a true gift to our mental health. I hope it marks the beginning of a lifetime of connection to source for my children." All right, so a couple more examples of solutions. Do y'all recognize the person in this photograph? Yeah, that's Mama Fannie Lou Hamer. who is a powerhouse. I don't know if y'all know, but Fannie Lou Hamer was born into a family of sharecroppers. And when she was only 6 years old, she was put out to the fields to work, picking cotton. And that's when she became an activist. You know, she realized that the plantation owner would adjust the scales so that the cotton harvest was undervalued, and you know, the sharecroppers would be stuck in the cycle of debt. So she went in the night and adjusted the scales back to correct. And she says in her memoir, like, that is the moment when I became an activist. And of course, that did not stop, right? And Fannie Lou Hamer went on to make so many waves in Mississippi and in our nation. And one of the things that she did was to band together with other sharecroppers in Mississippi who had been kicked off their land, often for the audacity to vote or to be part of civil rights organizing, joining the NAACP. And so they were like, we're going to create our own farm. And they pulled together their resources, their labor, and they started Freedom Farm in Sunflower County, Mississippi. This was 70 farmers working together to raise vegetables and livestock. They had a scholarship fund, they had a burial fee fund. And yeah, they were a cooperatively run. And so co-ops are such a powerful example. I also want to lift up New Communities in Albany, Georgia. This was started in 1969. And this was 5,700 acres of land, and it was co-stewarded by 500 Black farmers. This was the largest piece of land owned by Black people and the first community land trust in our country. They studied Indigenous land tenure models, different non-ownership community stewardship models. And despite a lot of obstacles, they just celebrated their 50th anniversary. This is Shirley Sherrod, one of the founders. So, you know, lots of love to her and to the community that survived. And so also, you know, inspired by that model, we're like, okay, we want to start a land trust and a cooperative. So our land is now held as part of a cooperative model. And we started a regional land trust called the Northeast Farmers of Color Land Trust to support Black and Indigenous folks in acquiring land, to be able to grow food, to be able to start our communities, and to be able to organize. It's also a mutual aid network, and yeah, has been really powerful in helping to change the landscape collectively in our region. And I want to shout out some of the cooperative projects of our alumni. So our alumni have gone on to seed all kind of brilliance, right? They get trained up and get inspired on the farm, and they go on, and we continue to provide support and mentorship and resources, sometimes fellowships, and they're just up to such great work. So a few of many shout outs, Green Acre Community Garden has transformed an underutilized lot into a flourishing farm and green space in urban New Jersey. Catatumbo Cooperative Farm, this is a worker-owned farm that's raising vegetables in South Chicago. Love Fed New Haven, this is a community of Black and Brown neighbors who are growing their own food and supplying gardens to those who need it most. Percussion Farms has been providing employment for people who are leaving the prison system, and they're growing healthy food for folks living in Seattle. Miracle on Craig Street is just in the next town over, an amazing food growing project, and on and on and on. So those are some shout outs. I want to also uplift Jermaine Jenkins, who started Fresh Future Farm. She used to rely on food stamps to feed herself and her family. And at a certain point was like, I'm tired of like waiting in these lines to get food. I'm gonna learn how to grow my own food. And she started looking at YouTube videos, and she took a gardening course, and she converted this tiny lot in her neighborhood to a garden that is now a flourishing green space. Like, they have banana trees and peanuts and all kind of vegetables, and they built a little grocery store on the plot, and it's amazing. It's a food oasis now. And she didn't even know how to grow food a few years ago, and now people is coming to her for training because she's learned so much. And
Naima, I'm gonna give you a 1 minute.
Thank you so much.
Card. I should have like a fancy card or something to flash.
Thank you so much. Okay. So, and on this shout out Chef Fresh, who participated in our immersion in 2018, you know, she had a dream while she was here and made an action plan of starting Fresher Together. And this was really rooted in a dream to be able to start a community food project. And here she is, it's like thriving. And they went from an urban lot to recently getting a gift of land to be able to start their own farm. So yeah, I was going to share this quote from her. She said, "A collaborative food project for healing, economic development, training, and retreat. I wrote that night of our action planning workshop. It was like a seed braided in my hair for my journey back to a different unknown. A seed, one that the earth has been making space for, that has been planted and watered and given sun. I've been finding the supports and community to nourish it, and it's starting to germinate. A new beginning is coming. We are the ones we've been waiting for."
Wow, we are the ones. Thank you so much, Naima, for just wowing us with the vibrancy and brilliance of the work that you are doing and that so many are doing that you are connected to. I really feel the truth of your cultivating just generations of people who are doing food justice and land justice work and lineage healing work. So thank you so much for sharing so much with us today, your knowledge, your labor, your poetry. Thank you so much. We're going to take a quick break, about 3 minutes. So if you need to use that, go right ahead, and we'll be back with Pat McCabe and then a Q&A. Thanks.
Okay. So see you at 3:40 or 48 of whatever hour you are alive in. Having trouble loading a song.
Do you want me to play it?
I got it. Breaks go quick. 3:48. As we're coming back from the break. Please give it up for Naima in the chat if you can. Share some love, or if you're a fan of reaction buttons, maybe share something that's sticking with you, an example of all of the fruits of this work. Thank you, Naima.
All right. As those roll in, sorry for the short break, y'all. This is just too juicy to not dive right back in. It is a great pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Pat McCabe. Pat McCabe, Woman Stands Shining, is a Dene mother, grandmother, activist, artist, writer, ceremonial leader, and international speaker. She is a voice for global peace, and her paintings are created as tools for individual, earth, and global healing. She draws upon the indigenous sciences of thriving life to reframe questions about sustainability and balance, and she is devoted to supporting the next generations, Women's Nation and Men's Nation, in being functional members of the Hoop of Life and upholding the honor of being human. Pat, thank you so much for being with us today. Grateful for you.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm super honored to be here today. Thank you so much, Naima. Woo! Super exciting, really exciting. My son is really farming deep, and he's bringing back fields that haven't been farmed for over 100 years and such in our valley. But that's not what I'm here to talk about. But I was all ears and I was all excited. So thank you. So let's see. I wanted to say greetings to you, Yate, and I'll continue that greeting the way we do when we are in meetings, and I'll say She'eya, Tachi ni Nishli, Aro Ashi Bashichi, Madish Gejne Dashanare, Klauschi Daushiche, Quataustani Nishli. And so I'm telling you about my clans. I come from Dene Nation, like I said, and so we get our clans from our mothers, and that's our kinship. It's a very deep traditional way of understanding kinship. So I'll just say really briefly there that my clan grandfather, he said, the United States is in double-digit unemployment, and so they're freaking out. And he said, but here on the reservation where he was in Shiprock, New Mexico, he said we've had 50% unemployment for decades. And he said, so how did we survive that? He said we survived that through our kinship, through our clans, through the strength of our clan relationships. So the clan relationship is basically saying, I can't be well if you're not well, to our clan relatives, and really to our whole people and to humanity. But those clan relationships are very, very sacrosanct, let's say. So I'm describing those clans for you today. Then I was also adopted into the Lakota spiritual way of life, and in that way I was given the name Muyakba Najimwi, and that translates roughly to womaning, standing, shining. And so I've been trying to grow into and live that name as best I can. So, gosh, so much has gone on already. I was really moved by hearing parts of the Pope's apology read. So I just want to say a couple things that came up there for me. So one, a lot of us have been doing a lot of ceremony around trying to have movement there in that seat of humanity that has had such an influence on earth, on peoples, on land, on quote, resources. And so there have been lots and lots and lots of very deep ceremonies that have gone on to, in particular, try to address the doctrine of discovery. But I know we had recently a very big forgiveness ceremony here in New Mexico, and my sister of Scottish and Irish descent, she was asked by one of the Lakota elders to be the holder of that. And so it was, it started out with some very specific incidents, in particular the massacre at on the Lakota reservation, but it ended up spreading out to people from all over the world, sending the offerings for this ceremony, asking for forgiveness from all different directions. It has been incredible. But I know one of the really deep prayers of it was around trying to get movement out of the Vatican for the reasons that Naima named, but many others, to acknowledge the truth that we see as self-evident. I mean, you can't look at me. You cannot look at me, I don't think, any one of you, and declare that I am somehow not a human being. And that was the basis for the claiming of the land, was that it was terra nullius, and that it was not occupied by human beings, and therefore it was open. So, so that apology is profound, and there's so much pain and suffering around it that not everybody wants to acknowledge it that way. I do, though. I want to tell you that I do. I acknowledge that movement, and I see it as an answer to prayer from peoples all over the world. And I want to say that that it really struck me, the parallel at Standing Rock, when the veterans, the United States military veterans, broke from their institutional holding and their party line, so to speak, and got down on their knees and apologized to some of our spiritual leaders and said, not only for the massacres and the murdering, but also for the kidnapping of the children, which directly interrupted your culture and your lineage and your understanding of how to be human. That I had a similar feeling there of, a sight that I wasn't sure that I would ever see, or that the heart of humanity could ever really come up with. But you know what? We did. So I hold it that way. And then I wanted to say, I don't remember the exact words, but there was something about, how indigenous people hold this Mother Earth as holding their ancestors. And I want to say that is true, and that is very precious, as it is to any human being, or probably even many animals. The sites of where the bones and bodies of our kin and our loved ones are held. But I want to point out too, without going too deep into theology here or cosmology, that the Mother Earth, I see the Mother Earth as intercessor from Creator to humanity. So we are spiritual beings, from our perspective, and yet we are embodied here. And so that's the big dilemma, right, in every spiritual practice is how to navigate that. So I want to say also that this Mother Earth we see as intercessor, or almost like, I guess you could say, like the priests are between human beings and God. But we say that the Mother Earth can be intercessor from Creator, from Spirit, from God, to be able to better translate those mysteries to the embodied human being. So I felt to name some of those things that came up while you were reading that apology. But I've been asked to share some things here, and I'm going to do my best to hit on all of them if I can, but we'll see. So one, I just want to name how beautiful it is that you, sisters, in your spiritual community, in your spiritual understanding of yourself and how you're connected to common beliefs and common spiritual practices, and I'm going to say moral codes, that you are coming together to consider what is possible in your community as a collective. It's very moving to me, because I was in a ceremony, and there was an elder who came, and she said to us, and I've never forgotten it. She said, if we were to create an unshakable sisterhood, we would heal the world. We would heal the world. And I could feel the truth in that. And maybe it's because you call yourselves sisters in that I feel it so deeply with you. But just to think about you really gathering yourselves together as a community, and your numbers, and your own holdings, and your own spiritual beliefs, and your own callings, bringing that all together to bear. What a shift that could make. What an incredible shift that could make, So I was told, sometimes I introduce myself as Holy Earth Surface Walker, which is another name for human being in our language, in Dinepizad. So I say I'm Holy Earth Surface Walker, life bringer, life bearer, and I stand with the full authority of the Mother Earth to speak on behalf of life in every instance. And so if we are making any decisions, if we are making any plans, it is my place to say, are we putting life at the center here? Because if we're not, this is too short-sighted. And the life that I bring forth will not be able to be tended correctly. So the life that I bring forth can be a child, but it can also be other creations, thinking 7 generations ahead. So I am excited when I think of you coming together in this way. I think it's a hugely exciting proposition for this Mother Earth. So I wanted to say that, myself, I've been trying to listen for God myself. I've been listening through the Mother Earth and through the spiritual entities that I feel can also translate well for the Divine Spirit to human beings. And in that way, I was presented with this proposition of becoming a holder, a tender, a steward, a shepherdess, if you will, of land at the base of one of our 4 sacred mountains. And the people who owned it, that's always been their wish, is that Dene people would be able to have that land, or have access through that land that they were holding, to be able to pray and to conduct our ceremonies, to uphold the honor of being human being in that place, because all the land at the base of that mountain is privately owned. And so our access has to have the full expression of our understanding of how to be human being has been kept out. And so when they said they were going to sell the land, we talked, and they said, gosh, they met my daughter first, but then they said, meeting the mama, they said, we would really, we think it would be good if somehow you could be the holder of this land. So, all these different lands have different values, and so they aren't in a position they owe money on the land, but then they have their own needs and such too. But I will say that they are kind of giving me that first option to, and working with me and praying with me and just this idea that they've held that, Dene people could have access to our mountain, I believe has carried this. So I said to the mountain and I said to the people, I'm willing to try to make this happen. It seems like the mountain wants it to happen. And so I won't say no, even though, I had no idea how how this could ever come about. But I will say that we have raised now more money than I've ever thought about to not only purchase the land, but to be able to start another vision that I was charged with, which is to start Joy House, the school for unlearning at this mountain. And so what I want to say about it is that, one of the things that I've been working with is to say that I want to have every aspect of how we're going about this be done in a way that has never been done before, because we want to help break down these systems and this legal way, which is, the legal way is not designed for cooperation and collaboration. And so if we want to cooperate and collaborate, it's a little bit tricky in there. So I'm really glad to hear that, you're going to have this session with radical real estate agents and radical attorneys, because it's necessary. And so to me, this is a freeing. It's moving us out of, we say we're moving out of the bondage that was law over love. That's how we look at it. And so the owners are up for it. People who have contributed to it are up for this challenge. And I want to say that, I've been working with a group of people, and we've been talking about reimagining money and protecting the sacred. That's been our whole goal of coming together. And so we have wealth holders, we have indigenous peoples, we have people from all different seats, I guess I'll say, of the human table, and people who don't normally sit down next to each other. And we've been considering how can we do this? How can we go about this process? And it's vulnerable. It's vulnerable for everybody to be talking from their heart about the structures that exist, the ways we've been trying to live in them. I'm going to say wealth holders have trauma. They have trauma of the responsibility of holding what they hold at this time on the Mother Earth, when I say life is screaming out for life. And so I've been saying, that I see this one way of looking at this metaphor, which we call money. Also, I've had it called the holy alchemical spirit of the money, because at this point it can become most anything. But I've been seeing it as, it could only have come from one place. It could only have come from this Mother Earth. Nowhere else. Where else would it come from? And so to withhold that entity, that living spirit, I'm saying that is actually damming up life and withholding life from life at this point. And so I think part of our process in coming together in community is to try to uphold and support each other, to have the courage to take these risks. Because one thing that we are taught, no matter whether you have a lot of money or a little money, is you must not be foolish with money. You must not be foolish with it. And so we've been taught different things about what would be considered foolish. So I feel like we're creating community to be able to support these radical new ideas and share that risk taking together. I want to say that, it's been a powerful process, and it also, at one point, because I felt like we weren't committing as deeply as was called for. If we're really going to reimagine money, if we're going to protect the sacred, I felt like we weren't moving deeply enough into discussion, holding this together with this very unique community that was carefully curated and brought together. I felt like, we weren't ready to move, willing to move as deeply as I felt was necessary in the realm of power, privilege, and race. And so I actually kind of had a break. My heart was so broken at the thought of missing this opportunity. We are unabashedly spiritual in this group. We have a ceremonial council. We have wisdom there. And I just thought, gosh, yes, those topics can be very fraught and very difficult. But I think we could do it. I think we have what is called for to hold it and to bring it into some kind of place that maybe we haven't even seen before. And so when I thought that we might miss that opportunity, my heart broke, and I ended up taking a big time out. I just cleared my schedule for the whole month of April, so this is very recent. And I went into a holistic health and trauma immersion program, somatic healing release. And what I discovered there was that we as human beings, I'll say that, my grandparents and my parents were raised in Dutch Christian Reformed missionary boarding schools. And so I was also raised in the church, and I stayed until I was 14, and then I left. And so I know some of the phrases from those places, that we are wonderfully wrought, is one of the phrases I remember, talking about how the human being is made. We have such sensitivity. We have such sensitivity in the body and the nervous system. And what I discovered is that different traumas can lodge in the body. And once that happens, it's like a needle on a record player that gets stuck and it just keeps bouncing into the same place. And what it can also do is it can create, it's like you're looking through these goggles. Now I'm calling them my trauma goggles. And the landscape there is very loaded. It's like a minefield. And it's very sensitive. It's very defensive. And it's can be dark or pessimistic. And so what I discovered, I released probably 6 major things that have been lodged in my body, in the 5 weeks I was there. So we went to town, man. We went at it. And I'm so glad that there's such a place to do that. I would recommend it to anybody to do this somatic healing, this trauma release. It's quite simple. And so, actually, it's amazingly simple for how much trouble it causes when we don't do that work. But I want to say that, so I went through these periods of looking at interpersonal trauma between me and the people I grew up around, specific incidents. And I want to say I've been trying to work on this since I was 16 years old. When I was 16 years old, I was put on antidepressants, and they told me it was going to destroy my heart by the time I was 30. But they said, at least you won't commit suicide. Can imagine them saying that to a 16-year-old. But anyway, so I've been working to hold this trauma out from crushing me, from making me useless, from making me not be able to give any service to this life, or to Creator, or to humanity. And so this was a very big breakthrough. But what I want to get to is, so I was looking at the things that happened between me and specific people, but then I began to see that after I would try to notice what was happening with these individuals, I had to then notice what happened to them in that missionary boarding school. And I could see how it could end up that they were doing these things that were traumatic to me, because they had also been traumatized there. And I also saw the soldiers. But I want to say that I also saw that those missionaries and those soldiers were also traumatized in their way. Traumatized in such a way that they could not fully see us as human beings. They could not see my parents and my grandparents as children who needed to be nurtured and protected. So this healing work is so powerful. The possibilities for what we can do here, and as I was releasing, I was having conversations. As part of it is you're supposed to go back to that moment that you got stuck and then make it somehow a successful memory, a non-painful memory. So I was having dialogues with those missionaries. I was having dialogues with those soldiers. And we ended up praying together. And we ended up having like a co-release, at least in my own heart and vision and prayer, So I don't know how that will travel, but I believe it will. And I'm going to wrap up with this because I know I'm here at about at my time. But what I want to say is I was asked to speak during Richard Rohr's conference this summer. And I didn't really know what to say exactly, but after a lot of meditation and prayer and even discussion with Father Richard and with some others that were surrounding him, what ended up coming me, I had this beautiful kind of ray of light come in at one point because, we were wanting to acknowledge what was taking place of finding all the bodies of the children in those schools in Canada. A co-witnessing was taking place that had been unprecedented. Indigenous people had been trying to say, this happened, this happened, this happened. But nobody was hearing us. But in that moment, for some reason, the world started hearing. And they were saying, what? What happened? How could that happen? But what I ended up thinking at that moment of what I could hope for is I said, what would happen if the church could fulfill its promise? The promise that I heard when I was in church as a young child, that the church could be refuge, that the church could be way shower, that the church could foster love and peace and justice and understanding. That's what I heard when I was small. And so I thought, what would happen if the church could truly fulfill what it says and wants to fulfill? Because the church is everywhere. So this is why I find it very exciting that you all are beginning to think this way and consider what your impact can be, what your power is, and especially representing what you represent to turn that into something different. So I'll stop there.
Thank you. Thank you, Pat. There's a lot of, I think, love happening in the chat and across the screens. Maybe even, Naima, if you can feel our witness, our presence, our love. I know you have mine, and I know you have that of so many here. Once I stop crying, I would love to just invite some conversation with the two of you. This feels like such a rare opportunity to have you both in conversation. And so since we don't have too much time left, I'm going to just go ahead and move to a few questions, and also just let things flow between you. And yes, please continue to pour your love and gratitude in the chat. Thank you. So I think one of the questions that I would love to ask right now is, you have both named that this work is co-arising in the networks that you're a part of, the communities you're a part of. And I'm curious if you can speak to how you understand the relationship between Black and Indigenous healing and land reparations. And Naima, if you could speak to a little bit of the reparations map that NEFOC and Soulfire Farm has begun, and Pat, the networks that you're also a part of, in that answer, if it feels true.
Thank you so much. Woman Sunshine, I am deeply moved by your witness and your vulnerability and the healing spirit I feel moving through and connecting us all in this powerful moment where I feel like we're being invited into some deep reckoning and deep healing. And thank you for the generous invitation. And I see Indigenous sovereignty and Black sovereignty so braided and bound in each other, interdependent. And it's something I've been deeply moved to experience relationally in our region. I mentioned the Northeast Farmers of Color Land Trust, which has been bringing our communities together in really unprecedented ways. And, it's like learning as we go, and it's not always easy, but just really understanding, like, yeah, how do we figure out how to work together, and also how to collaborate with land, how to collaborate with spirit, how to collaborate with people across class, to be able to honor the ancestral territories. I want to uplift like the Eastern Woodlands Rematriation Collective as well, who are in our region. All its founders represent the Wabanaki tribes, and they've been working on land back for Native people, what we call rematriation, and being able to like be in solidarity as we're also working on like a Black reparations project. And the reparations map that Sarah was alluding to is something that we started a couple of years ago to help match people who have land, in often case have like inherited lands that had been stolen, in the opportunity to gift that land, to transfer the title and the deed to Black and Indigenous land projects, communities, tribal governances, new farms. And, it's really simple people-to-people solidarity. So people are posting their projects, posting what they want to make happen on this map. And then we spread the word. This map exists. People can find out what great work is happening and how to resource it. And yeah, thanks for lifting it up. We've had so many successful matches so far, and like such great projects that are like have lands to plant their wildest dreams. And it's been incredibly powerful, in particular as a training farm at Soulfire. As I mentioned, we have thousands of people go through our trainings every year, and then they're equipped with the skills, they're inspired. And oftentimes it's such a barrier. It's like, okay, where's the land, And so the reparations map is a way to help to make those connections. And I can say from like personal experience, just how many gifted and brilliant and creative individuals and communities are poised to make magic and healing happen on land. And there's a beautiful invitation to be part of that, to be part of making that possible.
Thank you, Naima. So to be indigenous from this land is different than being immigrant. It's different than pretty much everybody else here in many ways, right? But what I've noticed in working in BIPOC collaborations is I feel African indigenous, Black indigenous uh, relatives are also totally carrying that indigenous um, spirit and an understanding. And when we support that, the wisdom that is coming forth, that in some ways is unimpaired by what indigenous people of this continent um, have to wade through in order to be able to get a certain kind of clarity. I just find it very powerful to collaborate with Black indigenous relatives in all of these areas that we have named. So I don't have a whole lot more to say than that, except that it's just been always very powerful, and I appreciate the clarity as I witness here in you, Naima, right now. And I'll just say that the networks, I'm just thinking about all these people in this network that I've been a part of, and then I just left in order to join you here today. Um, we're looking at how to dream beyond, what I call the power over paradigm, which I feel like, in one of our members in that group has this idea that she said, I had this dream, and I had this dream that there was like a spell cast over this land or this country. Now we have this nation state we call the United States here. But and she said, and I just feel like it's my job to to lift that spell off of us, to break that spell, And so it's an indoctrination of the human mind, an understanding of what life is and our reality here on this Mother Earth. But it's not leading to life. It's a death way. We can see that. So I also go back to the teaching of Jesus. I am the way, the truth, and the life. And so this construct is not that. And indigenous people say the same thing. To really honor this gift of life that has been offered to us and to all of our relations all around us, then we have to honor this life. And so I feel like, as I witness the work in the groups that I'm in, and all different people from Wall Street, people from farming, people from just so many different walks, are also looking to step outside of that mindset and that spell, I'll call it, to consider, what does it really mean? So I don't think anybody gets out of it. I'm like, if even the indigenous people don't get out of having to make a leap now, even though people look to us and say, you guys had something going there. I say we had a grip on the true deep knowledge of sustainability better than any human being that we're aware of. Indigenous peoples have. But even with that going, we still have a leap to make. So I'm going to say, we got a leap to make. I think the church has a leap to make. And there's some risk involved. But when I think about the gains, I think about this possibility of fulfilling the destiny of Mother Earth as human being. That's very powerful. And I'll also say, for me, fulfilling the spirit of fulfilling the dream and the vision that Creator had in mind when we were placed here.
Thank you both so much, Naima and Pat, for those responses. I think we have time for one more question, and if it's okay with folks, I think we'll probably go a few minutes over, maybe 5 or 10 minutes, in order to do some closing announcements and prayer, if that's all right with you two. Okay, great. So I guess a pretty simple question. What advice would you give or feel called to give to majority white communities that seek right relationship or seek to come correct? And Pat, you're receiving a lot of questions in the chat about people wanting to know how to support your land project at the Sacred Mountain. And so if either of you would like to speak to that, or just if you have other closing thoughts that you want to share, we really welcome whatever it is you have to say at this moment.
I guess I can start here. I would, one of the things that I say a lot in my teachings that were given to me, I'm only talking about what I'm working on and what was given to me is, and it's easier to maybe say in this community than it is in many communities I'm invited to speak in, but the way of the intellect, like we are seeing the way of the intellect all around us, because in modern world paradigm where everything is narrowed down to this. And so we're seeing how far that can go right now. We're seeing it. So I've been saying, what I notice about indigenous peoples, who I also call the holders of the deep science of sustainability, one of the hallmarks of these people is that they have a broad spectrum of ways of knowing. They know from the dance, they know from the song, they know from the prayer, they know from the interaction between them and the divine or the spirit, right? They have knowledge that way. And so we have lived deeply through the knowledge of our prayers and the dreams that are sent that way. And that has always, that from what I can tell, has been the most successful way of being human presence on the planet. And so, are we taking risks really by abandoning that logic, by abandoning that fear, by abandoning that scarcity, by abandoning self-preservation over everything? Or, if we're so interrelated and interconnected, my well-being depends on your well-being. I can't be well if you're not well. It's really not much of a risk at all. And for those of us who are living in faith, I believe, my experience has been that the divine is just, as soon as I head in that direction, everything begins to open in literally miraculous ways. People, resources, forgivenesses, open. And I'm going to say that has always been the way of the successful human being. And then as for how to help, prayer, please. This feels like a really big vision to me, to be the holder of this place that is not only going to give my people access to the land, a traditional place of prayer, our traditional elder, really, who taught us how to live and be a human being, one of the four principal ones, this mountain. But also, I'll put my website in the chat, and so that I'll be having a people's campaign here pretty soon, in which I'm hoping to have 1 million people put their hand on the idea that humans have always and can still collaborate with mountains in the well-being of Earth and in our own well-being, because the mountains help us to also collaborate with cosmos. So there we go.
Receiving that, thank you so much. Yeah, I'm thinking about how important, how necessary it is that there be a groundswell of people, right? Especially white folks who are demanding that their community leaders take action to require the healing and repair that's necessary, that are being in the practice of land return, and really in doing so, like building relationships with Indigenous and Black-led movements and communities, and getting behind them. And it's a time where we need to deepen our commitments across the board. And there's no requirement that we undertake this alone, right? You know, we need the support of our friends, our family, our communities, as well as like spiritual support, the support of the land, and also our relationship with the land, right? Because it requires shifting who holds the title, and it also requires an engagement in a process of healing and repair and transformation. Because we're doing some deep work of like uprooting the very systems and structures that make this necessary in the first place, right? So I'm thinking about relationship repair. I'm thinking about how much we have all been impacted by colonization. And so just wanting to remind us that this is not easy, it's not fast, it's not shallow, right? It asks us to dive deep into what we know, who we think we are, how we relate to the world around us. And that we have an invitation. You know, I really believe that all of us were born right now, or alive for a reason, and it's to participate in this shifting, in this turning, and that it's possible, right? When we commit to that journey of repair and transformation every day anew, that we can move through that together.
May it be so. May we not be alone in that. May we thank you so much for your stunning leadership, both of you, Pat, Naima, and your sacred and deep work, and sharing that invitation with us here today, and that invitation to leap and commit and be together in it. So I just not enough words to share the gratitude that I know is felt here. So thank you so much for being here. I think with that, we're going to turn to our last announcements, and then Pat will be closing us with prayer. So Brittany, the floor is yours.
Thanks, everyone. I'm just gonna also add, this is really quick, and it's just what's up ahead for session number 5. Can you see here we go. This is session number 5. We are so excited to welcome Janelle, Cassandra, and Ian to this last session, the nuts and bolts of land transition. And if you were worried that things will stop next week, you need not be concerned. We'll share more next week, but the headline is that we're already planning to continue creating spaces of learning and encounter and supporting communities and going deeper in this work, starting right in May and beyond. So more coming down the pipeline, or that's not the best word for this course.
The river.
What?
The river.
Coming down the river. And next week will be a little more tactical, but also, even like, if you don't come thinking you're going to get all of the legal and real estate answers that we've been hiding behind a curtain from you for the first 4 sessions, we're gonna learn how to think expansively about those questions too. And so it's going to be continued deepening and learning with 3 of the most lovely humans, and we can't wait for it. So please don't miss it. And that's it for me.
Thanks, Brittany. We'll turn it to you, Pat. Thank you for closing us in prayer.
My honor. Thank you. So I normally, as most people, I would say, do pray from the heart, but I feel to actually read a prayer because of our subject matter that was written when we opened an experimental process and also a fund. Anyway, I'm going to share that with you as you begin to consider similarities here. Upon the opening of the 3rd drawer, Together we make a place where thriving life, where future, where what is holy can meet, align, harmonize, and have access to our construct that we call money. Where all that has been extracted from the Mother Earth, from the bodies of men, women, and children, from the body of the oceans, from the sky, from the bodies of the flying ones, the swimming ones, the creepy crawly ones, the four-legged ones, from the plants, from the standing nation, the trees, from the stones, from the soil, from the waters, from the internal organs of the Mother Earth, coal, gold, oil, from the five-fingered one's goodness, from our love, from our psyches, and from our souls, from each place from which it has been extracted and gathered, from all the places where the flow of what is needed for cycling, spiraling life has been confined, directed, channeled into ways that do not serve thriving life, or love, or light, that do not serve future. All of this decimation of the beauty, harmony, balance, substance, and the sacred movement of life is here, now, recognized and reconciled, revered and placed in the healing hands and volition of a deep and holy co-creation, is now released, flowing out and flowing out and flowing out, a dam of life released to the places most critical, to the places most generative, to the places most restorative, to the places most joyful, to the places most creative for the wholeness and integrity of interbeing, to the places most sacred, to the places most affirmative of our true desire and our deepest consent to live unto 7 generations, to live with all our relations on this sacred, thriving, powerful earth, to align with her boundless creativity, ingenuity, and unconditional love in the creation of endless, ever-evolving life. We give our love here. We give our place in fearless generosity here. We give our faith here. We give our place in radical abundance here. We give our consent here. With this opening, we break the bondage that was law over love. We open and prepare ourselves to love the future in ways that the scarcity paradigm would not allow. We give this third drawer power and ask it to give us future. With our participation in this gathering, with the sacred gift of our volition, from the place on the sacred hoop of life that we have been given to uphold, we open this field of the third drawer to receive the future of the very highest possibility for life, light, and love. May all that this flow encounters be touched and transformed in whatever way is right by this currency of consciousness that has reached out to us and flow into and through the future consciousness that we are growing into. Holy life, holy future, please guide and direct us. Show us the ways. For all my relations.
Thank you, Pat, for that invitation again. Thank you, everyone, for staying a little bit over.
Yes.
We are going to move to close, and thank you again to Naima and Pat. I feel like you have lit some spirit fires today. They're just beaming all over this land, and so and burning in a lot of hearts. So may we tend them, together. May we be a support to your work and your dreams, and embolden them in the ways that we can, in the ways that we can take risks together. Thank you.
As we go, please, if you want, come off mute and say thank you and goodbye. Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Thank you so much. Thank
God
you.
bless. God bless. God bless.
Thank you.
God
Inalama
bless.
Take care.